back to Globalogues. This episode is going to be a sort of supplementary episode to our ordinary just rundowns and examinations of international stories, and we're going to take a moment and look at the narrative system itself, because it's forming essentially the skeleton, the structure of how we're looking at things. So it's worth it to take a little bit of time and examine what it is and how it works and why, so that it can help you understand more rather than perhaps confuse you more, which would obviously be useless. So the way we're going to do this is we're just going to take a few moments and look at those narrative cards that I keep putting up when I talk about different stories, and all the different categories in those narrative cards, what they mean, and how to understand them. So there you go. There's a card you haven't seen before about oil and Ghana. And, Ghana recently discovered some oil deposits in offshore blocks, and it's going through the process of figuring out how it's going to explore it and how the revenue is going to be divided up. And obviously oil can change a country a lot, as we saw with the Venezuela narrative. So what are all these different things about? Because every narrative has these different categories, and what do they mean? So let's start at the top, right? We've got, the title, that's pretty clear. You've then got those two little things that it says it's second order effects and nests within. Now, second order effects, that's supposed to be the other parts of the world, the other parts of the economy, things outside this narrative that receive effects from the developments within this narrative. And those three-digit codes or three-letter codes, those all refer to different industries and different regions, and we're going to cover what those codes are and how they work in another one, but just understand that. The nests within, those are sort of larger stories above. It's kind of like a reverse of the second order effects. It's broader, huge global stories that are ongoing, of which I'm arguing this story, this particular narrative, is a component of how that story turns out. So you've got PLX, GLX, SOX, referring to economic globalization, political changes in the 21st century, social changes in the 21st century. All of the X's are these even bigger stories, and we're not even going to try and touch on them this season because they're too enormous and I simply can't produce all that, but we're going to try and maybe get into a little bit of that next season. Then we've got this thing called saliency, regional short-term and regional long-term saliency. Regional, I mean the region that this is in this case Sub-Saharan Africa. Short-term is, within 1, 2, maybe 3 years. Long-term saliency is beyond that. Saliency is referring to how direct the effects within this narrative are on other things that go on in the region. So, oil matters a lot, and it matters to economies, so, it's higher than it would be if we're talking about, say, the banana industry. Then we've got global saliency and global potency. Saliency is the same thing, how directly it affects things. In this case, though, we're talking globally instead of just in its regency. And potency is the strength of those effects, because you can affect something very directly and not have a big, a powerful effect. If some celebrity says something, it might make it all around the world in, half a moment, but that's not necessarily going to be very powerful. Where other things, say in the mining industry, or oil, here we're talking about again, might affect more slowly, but they're very potent. Then we've got predictability and velocity. And these are a little bit harder to categorize because, again, the whole narrative system is a work in progress. I'm still developing it. You guys are sort of here for the sort of prototype version 2 phase of it. There's still a lot more to do. But predictability and velocity essentially refer to how much the different changes on the ground are from previous changes and how quickly those changes happen. So something like that one, there we go, like the Syrian civil war, which is dynamic and unstable. We're talking about a situation in which stories are changing all the time, and it's very hard to tell in advance what those are going to be. And in a situation of conflict, like kinetic conflict on the ground, like a war, it's almost by definition dynamic and unstable. And volatility, of course, is related to that. Short-term and long-term volatility, this, again, like with the previous one, it's a little bit harder to categorize and needs more work to refine it, but essentially how plausible and practical it is to extend outward into the future from an understanding of the present, the direction of where this narrative will be. And finally, you've got the effects intensity index from 0 to 5 in politics, economics, and security. And by security, I mean war and peace, safety versus stuff getting blown up. And that's pretty straightforward. I mean, 0 means low, 5 means high, and in a like back in the Syrian civil war situation, you've got very high numbers because everything's getting blown all to hell, and in a slightly more tranquil narrative like that one, it's a little bit lower. As we continue in the second season and we look at more and more and more narratives, and you're going to be able to see how those categories vary, or rather the expressions of those categories vary in different stories, you'll get a better feel for how they're used. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope this was at least a little bit informative, and we're going to keep moving along with the narratives and explain them a little better more and more and more through the season. So, take care. Bye-bye.